should leave the swans in the room. I can't do it right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. Ay, ay, ay. Maybe we should keep the opening and just edit it. We're going to do that.
Stephen King's Stanley Kubrick's The Shining.
Today we are talking about The Shining, the film by Stanley Kubrick. So, it originally came out on May 23rd, 1980. It came out to mixed reviews. Mostly, I believe, because the performances that Stanley Kubrick and the actors and the editor put into the film are a little bit extreme.
Stanley Kubrick? Extreme?
Of course, Chris is here. So we have Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, Danny Lloyd, who's the kid, who's great. I feel like the real key to Danny Lloyd is the fact that he's blank. He is just blank.
Yeah, and he didn't know he was filming a horror movie.
Yeah, which is great. That's good for kids, of course.
Yeah, Kubrick made him think he was filming a drama the entire time.
Yeah.
But at one point I was like, how is that kid acting so scared? Because I don't know acting as well as Jason did. And he was like, he's not acting scared. He's just completely blank, and we're able to put what we think he should be onto him at that point because of that blankness.
Yeah, he's a great choice as a child actor. Really, really well done. Scatman, of course, is in the film. I wanted to mention Joe Turkel. I really like Joe Turkel from Blade Runner. He's the head of the Tyrell Corporation. He is Tyrell. So I love seeing him in The Shining. I think it's super fun.
He's Lloyd, the bartender.
Right. He's just the bartender, right? But it's super cool to see him. I really like it. So we've written down a bunch of interesting facts about the movie that we want to go over.
Kind of a history of the production
of
this.
But I should say, before we go any further, over time, the film has been reevaluated.
Oh, yeah.
The performances have been reevaluated. It's a true classic. If you look up any kind of a horror top 100 list or whatever, it's always right at the top.
A lot of critics have called it the best horror movie of all time.
Oh, yeah. It's a brilliant film. I adore it.
Me too.
I think the performances are great. I do want to point out just a couple moments. Let's just start with Jack Nicholson. Jack Nicholson is extreme in the film. And the reason I believe that he comes across as so extreme is because they did so many takes, and it would get to the point that the actors would become frustrated or exhausted or all the above and just start doing crazy things. And most of the time, those are the takes that were chosen. It would be very interesting to see a version of the film where one of the first 5 takes were taken.
Oh, interesting.
Instead of one of the last 5 takes were taken.
Because how many hours of rolls do you think they have?
Oh my
in
God!
film?
Yeah, they were filming for over a year.
Yeah,
of course.
yeah.
You know, so it'd be very interesting to see that. Although I do appreciate that Stanley Kubrick took the time to get those takes and decided to use most of them, because he's basically a man possessed.
Yeah.
I mean, he's insane.
Yeah.
You'd have to be to get to that point. And that leads us right to Shelley Duvall, right? Shelley Duvall's performance can be considered to be over the top. I don't believe it is, but we were literally reading that she was nominated for a Razzie because that's how bad the performance was, because it was so extreme. But Chris has said 100 times, she's about to be killed by her husband.
Yeah, the fear and the terror that she brings to that role. And of course, I always think of the stair scene, which is,
of course, with the
one people talk about. Yeah, with the bat.
Yeah.
She is portraying some real terror there, and that makes that scene so real.
Yeah, I mean, for her to say, "I just want to go back to my room because I'm really confused."
Yeah.
I mean, she's gone. She is gone. The character has lost her mind because of this extreme situation she's been put in.
Yeah. She's in fear. True horror.
Yeah. So, the performances are brilliant. And, of course, people talk about how Stanley Kubrick basically bullied her on the set in order to try to get those performances out of her. But I do believe Shelley Duvall has always said nice things about Stanley Kubrick. I don't know. Of course, we weren't there.
Yeah.
But it seems like there's been some exaggeration on the part of how many takes were done and how people were treated and all that kind of stuff.
The new book that's come out, what's his name?
Yeah, I took a note here. So I think it's Lee Unkrich. I'm sorry for mispronouncing names.
Unkrich?
Yeah, we're going to do it a lot.
Sorry.
Yeah.
But he wrote a book that is basically the end-all, be-all book on The Shining. And he's come out and said this myth of hundreds and hundreds of takes is just that, a myth. That the most takes recorded in this film were 66 takes. So that destroys all the 127 in the Guinness Book of World Records and all that stuff. The most takes. In fact, the person that said 127 takes wasn't on set that day, apparently, says this writer. The most was 66, and that was the dolly scene of Shelley going into the ballroom.
The dolly shot of all three of them.
Yeah.
Of the person who runs the hotel and Jack in the interview. It's in the beginning scenes. They go into the gold ballroom, and there's that dolly shot where they go from the hallway into the ballroom. And, of course, Shelley's really amazed. It's a beautiful ballroom. That was 66 takes.
Yeah. And that's what he says is the most takes of any of them.
And having the technical element of a dolly is a big deal. That could be part of that.
Yeah.
Seriously.
All right. Yeah, we jumped ahead. Let's go.
Yeah.
There.
So we talked about Jack. We talked about Shelley. Danny, we already talked about.
Yep. He left acting. He did one more film after this, I think, and then left acting, or maybe a couple. But in '82 was his last film, so he did this for about 2 years and then left acting altogether. Not for any reason. He just it wasn't.
He's a kid.
His
it wasn't
parents
his probably
drug.
made him stop.
Yeah.
Who knows? So Scatman. This is a really weird topic because if you watch Key and Peele, they do this whole comedy section on the magical Negro, the character that comes into a story and is able to give a person advice because they are somehow sacred or other
spiritual or magical.
Spiritual.
Yeah.
And in the film, I don't know in the book, Chris is going to talk about the differences. But
Stephen King was obsessed with that concept. Stand and The Shining, just off the top of my head, both have that trope in high evidence.
Yeah. So that is in this film, but it is very... the actor does an excellent job. From watching the interviews and stuff, he seems like a great person.
Yeah.
But originally, we had read that Slim Pickens was actually being considered for that role, which is very interesting, and I think would have been a good choice if you're trying to avoid that trope. But it's also interesting that the hotel is so evil and so violent that it actually uses racism to try to force the character of Jack into the position that he's in, which is a really good choice because it's so disgustingly evil.
You're speaking about Grady in the bathroom.
Yeah, the bathroom scene.
Yeah.
Grady's just disgusting, and he just gets Jack amped up into that place with him. So that makes it a good choice. It's a very interesting interesting role.
Why did Slim Pickens turn it down? I can't remember.
He didn't. He said,
Oh, yeah.
I will not do this film if you're going to make me do over 100 takes. And Stanley Kubrick could not say, I won't make you do that. So they had to go their separate ways, which is funny because, of course, Slim Pickens is in Dr. Strangelove.
He knows Kubrick.
Yes. So he's aware of what it could be like. And the crazy thing about Dr. Strangelove, of course, is they have those scenes where they're going through the checklists. So first off, doing the scene is kind of boring, but if you have to do that 27 times, that's intense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's very intense. So, yeah.
It's an interesting concept, the Slim Pickens one, for me, because it is strange that the only person other than Jack that dies, the only person that Jack is able to kill is Dick Hallorann. Who is the only black character in the movie. So there's two reasons that Stanley might have not wanted that character to be African American, because it falls into that trope. The black man dies first, right? You know, and it would get rid of all that in kind of a whitewash sort of way. Which is
because in the book, he is African American.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it would be a weird choice because you get rid of the tropes that occurred, but on the same... And I don't even know if they were thinking about that trope in 80.
It's interesting he offered the role to a white guy.
Yeah. Really
it's
wild.
An interesting, weird thing.
I was shocked when I read that. Really wild.
And then we were talking about how there is no way for them to escape unless some person drives a snowcat up there.
Yeah, this is what I noticed in the book.
It's very possible that the creation of the character is literally only exists to get a snowcat up there. And it's even possible that the idea of The Shining, how would Danny contact this person to ask for help, could literally have simply come from the idea that Stephen King needed to get a snowcat up there.
Yeah, I don't know how... Well, this should be for the book. We'll save that for the book.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll save that for the book.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah.
All right, so, we talked about Slim Pickens. We talked about Joe. So I think we're good. The filming, of course, took over a year. It was a huge deal. Part of the reason, of course, is because the set burned down at one point.
Well, and it is interesting. I guess we can talk about the hotels. I don't know if that's coming up.
Yeah.
So he needed an exterior hotel, so they chose
in Oregon. They chose the Timberline Hotel.
Yeah,
I'll try to find the
which is a popular destination for people that love this film to go see the Timberline Hotel. But we were talking about it because we went to Estes Park this morning and saw the Stanley, which is the hotel that inspired Stephen King to write this novel. But the only time they were at the Overlook Hotel shooting was an aerial shot from a helicopter.
The Timberline.
Yeah, I mean the Timberline. Yeah. Was this aerial shot from a helicopter, and then Stanley Kubrick made the front of the Overlook. So they didn't film ever inside the Timberline. Sorry, I keep saying Overlook instead of Timberline.
Yeah.
They didn't film inside the Timberline.
Built the front of the Timberline on a set in England.
I don't even know if Kubrick ever was there. He might have just said yes to pictures.
Right.
Yeah.
When they're walking across the street with his luggage and getting the tour and they see the maze, none of that stuff is filmed in Oregon.
Right.
Literally, the only shot of the Overlook Hotel that's a hotel is from a helicopter from somebody who worked for Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah, it's an aerial shot. It's really interesting. So if you go there and go inside, it's nothing like what the film is at all.
Right. Now, of course, they've set up tours and things. I'm sure it's a nice place to visit if you're a Stanley Kubrick fan.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like the one we went to.
Right.
They have little tours and stuff. You know,
yeah.
They know. They know. Yeah. So that's interesting. So you've got the hotel that inspired Stephen King, and then you've got the Timberline, which was the outside that I guess sort of inspired Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah.
And then you got the sets that they built in England, and then you've got the car driving toward the hotel, the Volkswagen.
Iconic scene with that music.
Right, which was filmed in Montana in Glacier Park.
Glacier National Park. Yep. Yeah.
So, I mean,
aerial shots.
It's all over. Yeah, they were just flying it around a helicopter looking for nice places to film.
Well, and you've already said this, but tell them the Blade Runner story.
Oh, yes, yeah, in the Blade Runner video. Right. So at the end of Blade Runner, they needed to quickly put that shot together because the audience wasn't feeling comfortable with it. They wanted a happy ending. So the director built this ending where they run to the forest together. They're in their car, they're driving up this beautiful path, and they couldn't get the shots that they needed. So, of course, the director asked Stanley Kubrick if he had any extra shots with his helicopter, and the answer was obviously yes.
Right.
He had hours of shots, so he just sent all that stuff to Ridley Scott, and Ridley Scott was able to build the end of Blade Runner out of shots taken in Montana for The Shining by Stanley Kubrick.
And then delete it.
Right. He didn't want it, and then luckily most of the audience didn't want it,
Yeah.
so after that they were able to just get rid of it.
Yeah.
So that's good. Okay, yeah, so the hotel's really weird thing.
Oh, that's the other writer. So,
Yeah.
Stephen King was obviously working with Kubrick at the very beginning with casting. And they talked and bandied about, and Stephen King did not like any of Kubrick's choices, and I didn't write down all of his other choices. I know Robin Williams was one of them, which in another universe, I want to see it. Robin Williams play Jack
Oh my God.
Torrance.
Can you imagine the 37th take?
Oh my God.
Those two could not work together. I don't know how that would...
No way.
No.
It'd be so interesting.
Yeah.
But Stephen King had other choices. Who was the big popular one? Martin Sheen?
No, Stephen King, yeah.
Yeah, Stephen
Yes.
King wanted Christopher Reeves.
Right.
And there's all these people that I just can't imagine in this film. So eventually, I think Stephen King, Stanley Kubrick had it written into the contract that he could change the book to whatever he wanted.
Yeah.
And I actually want to back up a little bit again because this is super interesting to me. Stanley Kubrick was offered The Exorcist. He either just finished or was working on The Clockwork Orange. Exorcist didn't come out till 1973.
Yeah, and there's a lot of space between Stanley Kubrick's films. I mean, he does a lot of work. But
he was offered The Exorcist and said, I will do it if you give me full production credit. Control, yeah. And they were like, no. And that was the end of that. But then he made Barry Lyndon, and he felt sure that Barry Lyndon would make him a lot of money and would be beloved, and it wasn't, and The Exorcist was. So the rumor is that he was like, I got to make a commercial horror film in order to continue my career. And you had something interesting to say about...
Yeah, well, I've been talking a lot on this channel about how science fiction filmmakers or horror filmmakers have a tendency to make a few really successful films, and then they transition to historical drama, and they're massively beloved by America and Hollywood. They win a bunch of Academy Awards, and it's the best movie they've ever made, and blah, blah, blah. And we've seen it through many directors, but I do find it very interesting that did not work for Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah, nobody talks about Barry Lyndon.
No.
I don't even think I've ever seen it. I mean, all I hear
technically, I really enjoy hearing about Barry Lyndon and learning about Barry Lyndon, but watching it,
the most I've ever heard is that he used candles for lighting.
Right.
That's what I know about Barry Lyndon.
Yeah, I mean, it's an important movie, but it's not the most entertaining movie.
Yeah,
but I do find it really weird that it didn't work for Stanley Kubrick for some reason. I don't know why.
So he decided to make a commercial film. We try to be as academic in our sources as possible on this channel. But there was, like for the Exorcist thing, we had to go track down the book that was written about in and everything. But anyway, Stephen King tells a story, and all it's ever said is Stephen King heard That's all we could find. So
Right.
I don't know how true any of this is, but apparently he just got stacks and stacks and stacks of horror novels, manuscripts, and would read the first few pages and then throw them against the wall. And his secretary at one point didn't hear him throwing anything against the wall and went in, and he was completely enamored into Stephen King's The Shining. And Kubrick has said that it was, what did he say? Kubrick liked the novel a lot. He felt it was a wonderful and commercial novel that could do well for him to do a film on. So, yeah, he turned down The Exorcist, didn't get to do that, which, in another universe, again, what a weird thing it would be.
That would a strange thing to watch.
Yeah, somewhere there's a universe where The Exorcist was directed by Stanley Kubrick and Robin Williams was Jack Torrance. And that's a weird universe.
Yeah.
So he started working on The Shining from there, and Stephen King, I think, eventually just backed off. I think because it was in the contract.
So smart. Yeah. Putting it in the contract was the key.
Yeah.
And I talked earlier about artists selling off their work,
Yeah.
And for an artist to sell it off, take the money, sign the contract, and then complain seems a little bit crappy to me. I'm just going to say. And I believe a lot of America was really on Stephen King's side right when it came out, because
I think a lot of America still is. I think a lot of people might comment on this video that The Shining destroyed. I remember Aunt Peggy.
I don't
read the book and was just like, still to this day, she's like, I hate that movie. Maybe just because of her age. I don't know, because she's still back. But yeah, we'll have to see what the comments are.
Right.
But we'll get into the differences.
Yeah.
We'll talk about the differences between the book and the movie.
Yeah. Stanley Kubrick hired another writer.
Yeah. Can you read her name?
And Diane Johnson, I think is right.
Johnson, okay.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay.
And what we were able to find in our research is that the reason he hired another writer is because he didn't believe in the hereafter. He didn't believe in ghosts or any of that kind of stuff. So it was important for him to have somebody around who could handle that kind of stuff so that he could keep it authentic and make it work. And they went really far with that. I mean, they literally have a ghost open a door to let Jack out because he's locked in a room. So
that's kind of a big conversation, because a lot of people, what I came across, and I'm sure you as well, is a lot of people saying he took the supernatural element out. And he himself, there are quotes upon quotes of him saying, a ghost opened that door. The supernatural is in The Shining.
Yeah.
It absolutely is.
100%.
How it got there is a complete different discussion. Oh, that was the quote. Oh, fuck, now I don't remember. It was something like the supernatural, the psychological is going to explain the supernatural, but in the end, the supernatural explains the psychological.
Yeah, I think Stanley Kubrick was saying he thought that while reading the book, he thought that Stephen King would try to make the psychological explain the supernatural, but it turns out that he didn't do that.
Right, he went the opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is supernatural. And the film is totally supernatural. How else would Danny get in touch with
Halloran?
Halloran?
Yeah.
I mean, give me a break.
Yeah.
It's all supernatural and crazy.
Yeah.
It's not in somebody's head.
Yeah, well, and that, you just opened another can of worms. There's a million...
There are a million
interpretations, but we'll get into that later.
And that's a good indication of how good the movie is, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
People are still talking about it a lot.
Yeah.
It's surprising.
Well, and they're like watching it backwards and forwards at the same time. It's getting
weird.
Crazy.
It is getting crazy, yes.
Yeah, it's up there for me with like Dark Side of the Moon and Wizard of Oz. When people ask Pink Floyd, like, is that true? Their response is always vague. Because why would you want to destroy that?
All artists who can keep their mouth shut are the most successful.
Yeah, because people interpreting your art is half the fun. And once it's out there, the world owns it. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. But yeah, we'll get into interpretations later.
Yeah. So here's Johnny. Chris found a very interesting fact that Stanley Kubrick didn't know what Here's Johnny was.
And Jack Nicholson just
on take 28 or whatever.
yeah, what do you call it? He improvised
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And so Kubrick almost didn't use that take
Because he didn't know what he was doing.
because Kubrick lived in England and didn't know the line. So luckily they left that in.
Yeah, yeah. We also found that Stanley Kubrick had the crew and the cast watch Eraserhead
David Lynch.
to try to get them in the mood for the way the film should feel.
Yeah.
So that's very cool.
Yeah, I tried to watch Eraserhead.
I like Eraserhead.
The most I know about Eraserhead is Lady in the Radiator
Oh,
Song,
yeah.
and that's only because the Pixies did it.
Absolutely, yes. The Steadicam.
Oh, yeah.
So this was an early film for Steadicams. It wasn't invented for the film or anything like that. But they did do a really cool thing where they wanted the Steadicam to be really low. So rather than mounting it on the top, which they normally do, so it's about here, they actually took it off and they mounted it on the bottom of the cam so that it was really low.
And then they followed Danny
Of course.
on his
While he's going
trike.
on his big wheel, yeah.
That's big wheel, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a weird one because the front is a trike tire, but the back are big wheel tire. I don't know what's going on with that thing, but it doesn't matter.
I still love the scene where he rolls the tire to start going.
Yeah, man.
He
After he
pushes-
checks the room, he gets on and gets going. Yeah, man. Big wheels are awesome.
Yeah.
But one thing that I found really fascinating about it is they were talking about how cool it was at the time to see the floor so close to the camera shooting by and to see the walls shooting by as this person ran with the Steadicam.
And it was the set was so complete that I mean he built up that set so huge
yeah.
that they could do that. You could see. I mean, one of the things that blew my mind about the documentary was when they were talking about how many watts of light he needed to put through the windows to make it look like a cold winter day with really bright sun.
A million candles.
I thought that was. I thought that
Sure.
I didn't realize that was on a soundstage.
Yeah,
I mean,
that entire film is made on a soundstage in England.
That's crazy.
Yeah, there's literally the helicopter shots are the only actual not on the lot shots.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Except for the apartment shot.
Yeah, where did they do that?
So they rented, they built a little bit.
Oh, no, right. Yeah, this is cool. This is the maze. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's the part, of course, where Jack is looking down at the maze, and then we can see the two of them in there. And we always thought it was a helicopter shot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's high.
Yeah.
It is so high up. But they talk about in the documentary how they actually got that shot. They literally built the square of the maze, just the square part.
Just the middle where the people were walking.
Just the middle, at the base of a very high apartment complex.
And then they built a thing out.
Yeah, they went up on the roof.
Put the camera down.
Built it out. And they said that Stanley Kubrick literally climbed out on the thing so that he could look through the camera to make sure it was getting the right shot, which is crazy. It's weird.
Well, then they had to splice it in. They had to cut the film and how many frames per second they had to cut and put the thing in.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy how, and this kind of ties in with the floor going by and the walls going by. In the past, it was really, really hard to make movies, which is, I think, a strange thing that people just don't even consider anymore.
And it's still hard to make movies,
Well,
but it's hard
maybe.
in a different way.
Yeah, like...
I mean, when you watch all the credits of all the people that had to, make fireplaces and trees and AI, it's or not AI in on the computer digital effects.
Yeah.
It's crazy, and I know those people work hard and long hours on the computer. But yeah, when you go to practical effects and splicing film and everything, it's a whole new level of hard and
or even getting shots like that.
Yeah.
Like now, you would just use a drone.
Yeah.
Just fly the drone up over. I mean, so much has changed. The fact that they were amazed to see a camera that close to the floor, moving that quickly without bouncing, with no tracks. Because, of course, what you do before was a dolly shot.
Right.
But you can't you can't point the camera the direction you're rolling. They'd have to be beside Danny. That's the only way they could get that shot without a steady cam. So much has changed.
Yeah.
It's a
Well,
whole
Alfred
different
Hitchcock
world.
used to invent lenses and dig holes in the ground.
Lots
Yeah.
of there. All even Stanley Kubrick, of course,
Yeah.
making innovation after innovation.
Yeah,
after
just to get a
innovation.
shot.
Lights, like you were talking about. Cameras are so much better than they used to be.
Oh, man.
I mean, you don't need that kind of light anymore to get that kind of shot.
Yeah.
You just do it in post. Just do it on the computer.
Right, yeah.
It's weird. Everything's changed, and it's cool. So one thing we do want to talk about for the film is the music design. The music in this film is incredible.
We watched it last night, and I jumped at every time the day changed.
Wednesday.
Because it would just suddenly make this crazy
my gosh,
and
yeah.
the cuts were so fast.
Yeah, the sound design, the way they do things with the sound on the movement of the actors, on the cuts between the scenes, it's incredible. The sound design in this is incredible. And a lot of that was done by this person, Gordon Stainforth. I believe this person is the music editor. Coordinator.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what he did is go through and put the cues exactly where they needed to be in order to creep you out or just shock you when something happens.
Yeah.
The lineup of movement and sound is so intense in this film, and it's because of that. Now, we also, of course, have to mention Wendy Carlos and Rachel Elrond.
Yeah. Sorry, we're saying these names bad.
Yeah.
They did the music, or they composed a lot of the music for this film.
Yeah.
Not all of it, but...
Right, there's a lot of original stuff.
Yeah.
No, not original.
No, it's true. No, there's a lot of stuff that already existed.
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff that already existed.
Yeah, and he does that all the time.
Yeah, that he put in the film, of course.
But there's a cool little documentary of Wendy Carlos showing how she made an instrument that would... God, I can't even... It was like this weird theremin sounding instrument.
Yeah, they wanted it to sound like a voice.
Yeah, very cool. The music on this is incredible. It really is.
It truly is. The design is incredible. The composition is incredible. Now, there was a lot of music that Wendy Carlos put together that didn't get used in the film.
Yeah.
But you can now access that. There's a thing called... It came out in 2005, called Lost Scores Compilation.
Yeah.
And that has a lot of music from The Shining that didn't make it into The Shining. So if you're a Wendy Carlos fan and you like Clockwork Orange, because she did all of that, then this is absolutely worth picking up.
Yeah.
Really neat early electronic stuff on the Moog, all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moog or Moog, I could never figure it out.
Yeah, I don't know.
Tell us in the comments.
Oh. Yeah. So here's another interesting fact. Of course, The Shining came out the same weekend that Empire Strikes Back came out. From what we were reading, it sounds like The Shining opened in 10 theaters, whereas The Empire Strikes Back opened up in 160 different theaters across the U.S. It didn't have a good opening.
Yeah.
But over time, it has truly become a classic.
Also, Kubrick kept messing with it. He kept editing out scenes. He edited out about 27 minutes by the time it got to the UK and Europe. About 27 minutes of the film were gone, and they've luckily been replaced over time.
Yeah, the only thing that wasn't put back is the scene at the end.
Right.
With
and I saw there was
Wendy.
a YouTube video that was an AI reconstruction of the scene. So I don't even think there's really...
Well, no, they literally say that the theaters were ordered to cut that off the movie and send it back.
Yeah.
So that they could destroy it, I would assume.
Yeah.
They did not want it out there. They cut the scene off. It's a weird scene where the person who interviewed Jack Nicholson in the beginning...
Ullman.
Yeah, comes to visit Wendy in the end, and he explains that they couldn't find anything that they described.
Or his body.
Or Jack's body.
Yeah.
They couldn't find anything. And then he gives Danny a tennis ball, just like the one that Jack was throwing in the hotel the whole time, which raises all kinds of weird, crazy questions about his involvement with the ghosts
And I think it was either Siskel or Ebert that said it was good he took that out because it's just one too many rug pulls.
yeah.
It makes you question everything you've seen.
Yeah.
And Shelley Duvall thought the opposite. She thought it completed the arc of the ball. And I have a feeling to believe it is one too many rug pulls.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I was surprised. It never occurred to me that the ball that rolls up to Danny while he's playing with his little car is the same ball that Jack is throwing.
Yeah, I guess I never thought of that either.
I'd never thought of that
Yeah.
until the ball came up at the end when we were reading about the scene.
Yeah.
So I do believe that in one aspect, it might have hurt the film a tiny bit to not have that ball a third time, because you need it in threes
Right.
in order to make it
For
really
the arc
work.
to be complete.
Yeah. But I don't know if the ball matters.
Right.
You know,
Even if the ball is explained by him giving him the ball,
what does it explain?
Yeah. Well, I don't know what we're dealing with here. It's strange.
No.
So, I feel like, and I had this conversation with you a while ago about The Shining is like the movie that YouTubers love to try to explain. It's like exploded, and there's so many theories, and that's enjoyable, and that's fun, and that's interpretation, and I like that. But for me, The Shining was always pretty straightforward, but only when you weave it with the book, which we'll talk about when we talk about the book a little bit. So some of them seemed kind of silly to me, the lengths that they would go. And we're not going to go into all these different ones, but I would like to recommend a YouTuber, and I don't know if this is how you pronounce his channel name, but I think it's called Corn Pone Flicks. And he does a video of The Shining, which I'm going to link in the description, that looks at the evidence of all these theories, and it's incredible. And he green screens himself into the film the whole time he's talking, and it is wild. Jason found the video. And right when I arrived here after driving from New Mexico, he was like, "You got to see this." And it was incredible. So really, truly, I don't feel like we could do justice discussing this the way that he does with all the research he's done. So if you're interested in looking at a lot of the theories and seeing the viability of them,
Right.
check out
our
this.
point of view of the viability.
Yeah.
He said exactly what I think we would say.
Yeah, and he did so much research.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just incredible. So check that out. That's really cool. So from here on out, I want to talk just a bit about the differences between the book and the movie. This is a kind of a hotly debated topic. This Stephen King didn't really like the film. He's softened slightly as time has gone on, but he really doesn't like the film. And of course, the movie version of Dr. Sleep retroactively redoes the end of the film to try to make the film make sense so that Dr. Sleep can be a sequel to Stanley Kubrick's film. I want to talk a little bit about what it is to translate a book to a film, and the first thing that I think really gets people's goat on translating a book to a film is that things get left out. I remember when we saw the first Harry Potter, and that movie almost directly kind of follows
Pretty good,
the
because
book.
it's a shorter book.
Yeah, but there was one challenge that was left out in these challenges that they had to do to make it to the final bad guy. And Hermione gets a challenge and Ron gets a challenge. And it's weird because in the book, Hermione has kind of two challenges.
Kind of. Hermione solves problems through the whole thing.
Right.
She is the problem solver. So I guess they said we have to cut something. We might as well cut out Hermione's challenge because she's been solving problems the entire time.
Well, and really, truly,
the plant thing?
yeah.
Is that what you're thinking
Yeah,
about?
yeah. Anyway, but this isn't a Harry Potter movie review. So it is fun to go, that wasn't in the book. I read the book. That wasn't in the book. For me, I'm okay with changes, just because the transfer of a story from book to film is harder than I think everybody realizes. For instance, if we were to make a Lord of the Rings that was super true to the book, there would be a million time shifts, because characters are constantly leaving in that book and then coming back and sitting around a fire and telling the other characters what happened while they were gone. And Peter Jackson,
Director.
yeah, very wisely just put everything happening as it happened, instead of having this constant retroactive look for it. Movies are a different beast than books. So right away, if somebody hates The Shining because Kubrick's Shining because it's different than Stephen King's Shining, only because they don't like people not making the film exactly as the book is, then
They'll never like any book that's put into a
yeah,
movie.
it's
There
very
are
hard.
fundamental things that must be changed. You have to show things, not tell things. And in a book, you cannot show things. You have to tell things.
Every movie would have a narrator that's the person's thoughts.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
would be a nightmare. You guys, we were talking about David Lynch's Dune, and he tried to be a little bit more faithful than I think the newer Dune films are, in the sense that he wanted to get their thoughts in there. So he's got the characters doing voiceovers over their faces. They're whispering. Like, how did they know that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I've seen on the internet, people will edit together all the whispering throughout the film.
Because it's kind of ridiculous.
It kind of is. You can't, you have to bite the bullet and say, okay, I'm going to make this
I'm going to translate it.
into a movie.
Yeah.
You cannot faithfully adapt anything. It just, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Now, you can be more or less,
Right.
You know, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that there aren't films that completely messed up when they tried to adapt a book and they did it totally wrong. You can do it totally
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
But things must change.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of my first point, is things have to change. My second point is a movie is a much smaller, finite time than a novel is. And I think this is what Kubrick was faced with when looking at how to adapt The Shining. And I think that there's three strong major themes that run through The Shining book. There is the concept of alcoholism and what it does to a family. There's also, and these might be close or connected, the theme of generational trauma through abuse. Right? Jack Torrance is not just fighting alcoholism, he's also an abuser, and he's fighting his desire to use violence to solve things.
Like
And-
his father did.
Just like his
Generational.
father did. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And there's so much of that in the book that's absolutely wonderful. You really understand Jack through the book. And also there's this supernatural element, right? This haunting and the idea of Danny's shine, this ESP that Danny has. And I think Kubrick had to look at that book and decide which theme he wanted to make. And he chose the supernatural hotel theme. That was what he settled on in the book. And a lot of people say that it's just not faithful at all. He left everything out. He didn't. He wrote his own story, and I really disagree with that. The aspects of the supernatural hotel that, when I watched The Shining this time after just doing my reread, of course, except for the major ending, which a lot of people do have a problem with, are incredible. The scene where they're dragging Jack into the pantry, the scenes at the bar, almost the scene in the bathroom, so much of it is straight up word for word. So much of that I was just like, wow, this is, the book has just come to life right here. It's absolutely incredible. Stanley Kubrick really respected and considered the novel when he made this movie. I mean, there are lines that you can just see over and over again from the book that are in the movie, straight, just as they are in the book. It's incredible. But he only picked one aspect of the book to talk about, and that's where I think Stephen King's problem comes from, is that he wanted the story of an everyman that is fighting addiction, and Stephen King himself has said a lot of this Shining stuff about the alcoholism is autobiographical. He was working through alcoholism himself, so he wants to tell the story of a person changing, that people can actually change. They can leave the abuse of the past and the addiction of alcohol behind and become better people. And that's the aspect of The Shining that was most important, I think, to Stephen King. That's the story that he wanted to tell. But he also put a kick-ass supernatural story together while he was telling that story. And Kubrick had to jettison some of the themes, and he chose to tell the terrifying hotel story. The reason that I think that The Shining is actually really simple when it comes right down to it is that it tells the supernatural story in the book. I mean, it really does. And Stephen King really laid that out in the book. And I think that reading the book and then watching The Shining actually makes you understand Kubrick's The Shining much better. Even the photograph at the end. Because in the book, of course, all these... First off, the Overlook is haunted, but it's just stains of violence and memories like picture shows. People don't... Not every caretaker goes insane that's ever there. The important aspect of this novel is that when Danny, who is shining like nobody's ever shined before, right, enters the hotel, the power of his shine allows these hauntings that people would maybe catch sight out of the corner of their eye or whatever to really gain power and a consciousness and start kind of thinking, and the evil of the hotel really begins to feed off of Danny's shine, and that's what makes the haunting of the hotel so intense as it goes on. That's what they want in the book is Danny. If Danny dies there in the hotel, the ghosts, the evil will be able to live on through his shine. So the concept of the photograph at the end and the line, which is right from the book where Grady says, "You've always been the caretaker here," makes sense in the book because all the ghosts are from different time periods, and as they feed on the shine, the altered state of the hotel, in the sense that it becomes a place of all times, because these ghosts have now got a conscience and are able to consciousness and are able to think and exist. So suddenly the hotel is in a state of all times. So there's parties going on, and there's Jack Torrance's time and Grady's time, and all these things are suddenly happening at once, which is where you get the concept that Jack has always been there, because there is no concept of time anymore. Right. All times are happening at once, and that's kind of how I explain the ending of the movie with the photograph of Jack being there in 1921. So I think that Kubrick was actually really honoring Stephen King's concepts. He just jettisoned other parts of it because he couldn't fit it into 2.5 hours. Right. There's no way. And if you made a miniseries of this, if Mike Flanagan, who it has brought drama horror to the forefront of all horror. I mean, The Haunting of Hill House changed everything, in my opinion. If you were to get him to do The Shining, he could do a Shining that was super cool, that really explored the entirety of that, because he could do it with 10 2-hour episodes. And that's a new way we can do TV, and with a budget, because Stephen King tried to do in 97 his own adaptation, and we tried to watch some of it. And I'm sorry, it's painful.
Yeah, they didn't have the budget.
They didn't have the budget. They didn't have the budget. If you give somebody a budget who's very talented, like Mike Flanagan, this book could be made very faithful.
And I do want to say, there are still things that you could not pull off.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even with the right budget and the right director, you're still going to be like, dude, we have to cut that because it looks stupid.
The fire hose in the book is so scary. Really, really terrifying. And it's because we're in Danny's mind, and he's psyching himself up, and he's like, did it move? Did it move? And he's got to run past it. And if you've ever felt that kind of fear as a kid, which I'm sure you have, you know how that can build up, and you think it's moving slightly. And Stephen King is the king at that. He really is. It's absolutely incredible. But in that miniseries, the hose is not scary. The hose is not scary, and that's... I mean, it could be jump scare scary.
Yeah.
But it's not dread scary.
Right.
It's not deep down dread.
It's not the same as the book.
Yeah, there's certain things that just can't be translated. And I think the topiary animals are right on the cusp. Mm-hmm. They're right on the cusp. They didn't look great in the miniseries. No. And I don't know how cool we could make them. They're monsters. Right. And in the book, again, they move slightly, so you're not 100% sure if they moved, and then they get closer to the path, like they're stalking you, but it's like red light, green light. It's brilliant. Yeah. It's brilliant. I don't know how you would do it in a movie. It's really hard to do that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where a lot of the trouble comes from, is Stanley Kubrick, I think, chose the heart of Stephen King's book, but only one of them. Mm-hmm. Because there are 3 specific lines of narrative that are very important to that book, and you can't do that in 2 hours. You can't do it. So Stanley Kubrick said, I'm going to pick one of them, and he picked one of them, and I think he did it justice. I really do. This is one of my favorite Stephen King adaptations. And I love the early ones. I love Carrie. I love The Shining. The Salem's Lot one is good. I wish that guy could shut his door. But I talked about that in another video. So I think that it's strange, because you'll see a lot of people, I've seen comments already that say, never let Stephen King adapt one of his own movies. No. He can't do it because he's brilliant as a writer, but film's a different beast, and that has to be taken into consideration when you go see a film.
Yeah, if you don't understand the difference in the languages, you're going to make a disaster every time.
Yeah. Stephen King wrote a couple of scripts for Kubrick for The Shining. He did. And Kubrick turned them down because he knew he didn't want to make a film that wouldn't age well. Yeah. He knew. Yeah. He knew that he had to get a different writer in there so that he could focus on one aspect of this mammoth book and make an incredible
because how far into the book did they get to the hotel?
It's a third of that thick book before they get to the hotel. Yeah. And then even then, you got to get to the halfway point before they get snowed in. Mm. I mean, you're halfway through the book before they get snowed in and enjoying every moment of it. Sure. But I don't think that could have worked in a 2-hour film. I don't think he could have done it.
No way.
I mean, Stanley Kubrick had to say, okay, we're focusing on this aspect of this, which means we have to jettison this first half of the novel.
And personally, and this is just my opinion, I believe that the ending of the film is very justified when you lose that other stuff. Mm-hmm. Because if you make a movie about a person becoming possessed and then killing their family...
Trying.
In this case, trying.
Right.
Yeah. I appreciate the trying because... It's going to sound dumb, but I don't want a film to make excuses for
Abuse.
abuse.
Yeah.
You know, straight up.
Yeah, it's weird. Every
To
time
be
I
able to
watch
say-
the Amityville Horror, I'm like,
Yeah.
is this guy just got abusive and
Yeah.
trying to? And
is
I know
this
that's
full
not
of shit?
fair. Yeah.
Right.
But if sometimes it feels like an excuse for abuse.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah, and I appreciate that this film didn't try to do that. He's horrible at it.
Yeah.
He does a horrible job at this, and you can say it's because it was an actual possession.
Right.
It wasn't in him to kill his family. He couldn't do it. They pushed him as hard as they could, but he couldn't do it. And I appreciate that, and I like that. I like...
Well,
that
and
you
he couldn't
could-
do it because his family outsmarted him.
Yes, they were super smart.
Yeah.
Maybe he has a big heart and he really loves them. Whatever. I appreciate that that's how it turned out.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I believe the book has that too, but you'll get into that.
I'll get into
with-
that, yeah.
With the book stuff.
So that's my book talk. So now let's talk about the pros and cons of the movie.
Yeah. I think the thing that I like the most about this movie is how creepy it actually is.
Yeah, dread.
It's so amazing right from the start. And Stanley Kubrick, as always, puts himself in a weird position, I believe, where he has to make life harder for himself. Everything in this movie is well lit. Yeah, they could have filmed the Volkswagen driving up the mountain in the middle of the night. They could have had the headlights on. They could have been playing the scary music. It works just fine in total daylight, which is so insane and weird. The light pouring in through those windows because it's supposed to be winter outside. Everything is so well lit. There's no Danny driving around on his big wheel.
Yeah.
All the lights are on. There's no dark hallways. It's amazing how he was able to build up that creep without using just jump scares and traditional horror tropes.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's crazy because when the movie came out, some of the reviews said there's nothing scary about this film. And I think that those people are off. Number one, the first time I watched it, it scared the crap out of me.
Yeah.
And there was a long time where I was always afraid to put it on, but I really wanted to watch it again. It is scary. I believe it is scary. But it's scary in the sense that this is a crime that happens, and they've decided to take a supernatural look at what if that was supernatural that made that occur. But the concept of a loved one trying to kill you is terrifying. And I don't think... I mean, Amityville Horror is a great movie, and we'll probably talk about it sometime on this channel. But it is not at this level. Like, I think Kubrick has totally taken the award easily of best version of this trope. Because
of the creepiness.
Yeah, because I mean,
because of the music and because of the shock cuts going to Wednesday and jumping just because the sound effect happens at that time
and just how terrifying Jack is.
Yeah, just having him sit there doing nothing and just showing his face while he stands there or while he sits there. When Danny walks in the room and he's just sitting up in the bed. I mean, there's creepy stuff in this movie.
And it's interesting that he gets the job, and he's going to take care of the Overlook Hotel, and this is a little bit different than the book. Wendy does everything. She's the one down by the furnace. She's the one making the CB calls. All we ever see Jack doing is apparently writing, and of course we know he's not writing.
Right.
He's just sitting around going insane. The hotel is working on him. And that is a dread that I think really works. And I got to tell you, the scene where he is let out of the pantry is epic in the book and epic in this movie. Kubrick's right. That builds to the point where any question we had of whether or not this is supernatural is over. It's over. And you can, of course, interpret it any way you want. But Kubrick himself has said that scene is where we implicitly imply, and he talked about how much he liked this part in the book as well, that a ghost just let Jack out of the pantry.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Straight up, a ghost just let Jack out of the pantry. And the terror of that, because it was such a good idea to put him in the pantry. Wendy's brilliant and resourceful. It was such a good idea to do that, and then the hotel had its way. It's really, really incredible, and that creep is great.
Yeah,
Absolutely great.
yeah. And I guess we should talk about Wendy for just a minute. Stanley Kubrick did purposely make the choice to make the Wendy character weaker than she is in the book.
Yeah.
Apparently,
Absolutely.
A quote that we heard was that he wanted someone who would realistically put up with more abuse than the average person.
And abusers look for people that are
Sure.
going to be abused.
Yes. Yeah, and I do feel like that choice is justified. It's like having Jack be completely bonkers most of the time. He's possessed. She's weaker, and in the end, he doesn't actually kill his family. I appreciate those choices, even though I believe in the beginning those were shocking enough because people had read the book that they were a criticism.
Right.
But I believe over time people have realized that that's actually a positive quality for the film. You know, there would never be any reason to change the book. That would be insane.
Right.
But for the film, those are good choices, I believe.
Well, he was making a statement about supernatural haunting of a person. Really, truly.
Yeah.
And a person that had problems. And that's true in the book as well.
Yeah.
It's not like Jack Torrance in the book is the perfect everyman when the book starts. He has trouble. And a lot of what's gone on is because of his addictions and upbringing. So yeah, I think that that Kubrick grabbed onto that and said, we're dealing with a very flawed character who is abusive at the beginning. Right? I think it's a full, well said story, and I don't really have any cons. I love this movie.
No, it's a great movie.
I love this movie.
Yeah.
I don't.
If you are planning on watching this and you've never seen it before, just know that it's Stanley Kubrick, so it's slow.
Yeah.
It is a slow burn, right? The
I love
whole
slow
point
burns.
of it is to creep you out. It's a creepy movie. This is not Friday the 13th at all.
It's not even a horror director.
No, that's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
This
That's
was
right.
his first foray into horror, and he killed it.
Yeah.
I do think people have a tendency to put Kubrick on maybe a higher pedestal than we need to.
Yeah, there's a lot of little inconsistencies throughout the film, mostly probably because of the fire that burned down the set.
Yeah.
So there's continuity problems. Chairs, no chairs. The big wooden structure is suddenly gone from the large room that Jack's in. Just stupid little things, but that's very common in many, many, many films. Yeah. Oh yes, we got to show.
Cultural significance of the film. It is interesting how steeped in Shining culture we are since King released the novel, and I think this movie had a huge part to do with that.
Of course.
So we went today to the Stanley Hotel, which is where King initially got the idea for this. They're doing things at that hotel that are related to the movie and not to the novel, not to Stephen King's art. For instance, at the beginning of this video, you saw that maze. They're growing a hedge maze in front of the Stanley Hotel. And when we went the first time a couple years back, it was like knee level. It was tiny. Now it's getting taller.
Yeah.
And I think that pretty soon that's going to be a really kick-ass hedge maze. I really do. But it's interesting to me. And when you go through a lot of the tours, for instance, and I'll put this up here, they, I have a little video of it, so I don't know where I'll put it in the video. But as you saw, or as you will see, or whatever, there is a room in that hotel that they made look exactly like the bathroom in the set of The Shining. They redid one of their bathrooms to look just like it did in The Shining for their tour. that hotel has nothing to do with Stanley Kubrick. But the film is so iconic in our culture that the Stanley Hotel can't ignore it when they talk about The Shining. They can't, because it skyrocketed that book, which was already beloved, into a wider audience. I have a painting that I brought down that I wanted to be behind us by El Gato Gomez, and this is the Shining twins. One with a Black Sabbath shirt and one with a Motorhead shirt. I think you have an El Gato Gomez as well, don't you?
Yeah, that's the Yoda with the Joy Division shirt.
Yeah, if you've never heard of El Gato Gomez, really, really wonderful pop culture paintings. Yeah, I got a bunch of El Gato's work and gave Jason the Yoda with the Joy Division shirt.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
But yeah, it's everywhere. It's all over our culture. I think everybody knows Red Rum and the Shining. So
also at the Stanley Hotel, they did film the TV miniseries there.
yeah,
So, but the TV miniseries doesn't have the hedge maze. It's very interesting how much the Stanley Kubrick film is important, whereas the TV miniseries, it just didn't quite cut it.
well, it's weird they're not making topiary animals.
Yeah, they're growing a hedge maze.
They're growing a hedge maze.
You
That kind of says it all.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah.
If you ever get a chance to go to the Stanley Hotel, it's a riot. The tour, the Shining tour, is so much fun. And you get to walk around the hotel that Stephen King was inspired by The Shining. But I'll talk about that more in the book video.
All right. Well, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, hit the like button. If you want to see more like this, make sure to subscribe and have a great day.